Welcome back to our commentary series exploring the writings of Ajmal from his website, theborderofamind.com.
Yes.
I'm so intrigued by this week's post, Illusion of Permanence.
Yeah.
The title alone had me hooked.
It really is captivating, isn't it? It
Yeah.
speaks to this deep-seated human desire I think we all have,
Right.
for things to last, to remain constant. But Ajmal challenges that notion right from the start.
You're right. And what I find fascinating is that even though he's kind of touched upon this concept of transience in his previous work, he keeps coming back to it.
Right.
It's almost as if it's like this puzzle he's trying to solve, or a recurring dream he needs to decipher.
It does feel that way, doesn't
Yeah.
it? And I think that's where the real depth of this piece lies. It's not just a philosophical musing on impermanence, it's a personal exploration, a wrestling with the implications of transience for how we live, how we perceive the world, and how we find meaning in a constantly changing reality.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit.
Sure.
Ajmal's central argument seems to be that in a world obsessed with permanence,
Yeah,
it's actually the ephemeral that holds the deepest truths.
that's right.
But why? Why would he believe that?
Well, think about it this way. When we cling to the idea of permanence, when we try to hold on to things as they are, we're essentially resisting the natural flow of life.
Right.
Everything is in constant flux.
Yeah.
Our bodies, our relationships, our thoughts, even the physical world around us.
So by clinging to an illusion, we're missing out on what exactly?
The beauty of each fleeting moment,
Okay.
the possibility of growth and transformation that comes with change, and perhaps even, as Ajmal suggests, on a deeper connection with something larger than ourselves,
Okay.
something infinite.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me.
Okay.
He uses some incredibly vivid imagery to make this point.
Yes.
I'm thinking of the passage where he describes the cherry blossom. He argues its beauty lies not just in its full bloom, but also in its eventual disintegration.
That's such a powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah.
It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that beauty and decay are inextricably linked.
Right.
That the very process of fading, of falling apart, is just as essential to the cycle of life as growth and renewal. And it begs the question, what if we could approach other aspects of our lives with the same acceptance?
Right.
The ending of relationships, the loss of a job, even the aging process itself.
Wow, you're totally right. It's almost like he's turning our typical understanding of beauty on its head.
Yeah.
I mean, we usually associate beauty with youth, with vitality, with things that are whole and pristine.
Right.
But he's suggesting there's a profound beauty to be found in impermanence, in the process of letting go.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective, that willingness to find beauty in the impermanent, can be profoundly liberating.
But isn't that easier said than done?
Yeah.
It's natural for us to crave stability, to want things to last.
Sure.
Is he suggesting we just abandon those desires altogether?
That's a great question, and one that I wrestled with as I was reading this post. Maybe it's not about erasing those desires completely, but rather about acknowledging them, understanding their roots, and then choosing to shift our focus.
Shift our focus to what?
To the present moment.
Okay.
To the beauty that exists right now in all its fleeting glory. Because when we're caught up in trying to hold on to things to control outcomes,
Right.
we miss out on the richness of what's happening right here, right now.
And that brings us to his discussion about the societal implications of clinging to permanence.
Yes.
He makes the rather bold claim that chasing the illusion of permanence actually prevents us from fully experiencing the beauty of each moment. How did he support that?
Well, he points out that when we're fixated on making things last, on seeking security and stability,
Okay.
we often develop a fear of change.
Right.
We become resistant to the natural flow of life, which is inherently impermanent.
Right.
This fear can manifest in various ways: clinging to unhealthy relationships, resisting new experiences, even hoarding material possessions.
So it sounds like he's saying we get so caught up in trying to make things permanent that we end up sacrificing the present moment.
Precisely. And by clinging to this illusion of control, we create a wall between ourselves and the full spectrum of human experience.
Right.
Joy, sorrow, loss, growth.
That's a thought-provoking insight. It's as if we're so busy trying to preserve a particular version of our lives, a particular moment in time, that we miss out on the richness of life's unfolding.
And in that missing out and that resistance to change,
Yeah.
we also develop a fear of death, because ultimately death is the ultimate expression of impermanence.
That's a heavy thought, but you're right. If we can't accept the smaller changes in our lives, how can we possibly face the reality of our own mortality?
And that's where Ajmal's perspective becomes truly transformative.
Okay.
He suggests that by accepting our own finitude, by acknowledging that things end, we actually open ourselves up to a deeper connection with something infinite.
It sounds almost paradoxical, doesn't it?
It does.
Embracing our limited time on Earth to tap into something limitless.
It does seem paradoxical, but there's a certain logic to it. Think about it this way. When we're constantly striving for permanence, for control, our focus narrows. We become preoccupied with preserving what we have with avoiding loss.
Right.
But when we accept that everything is transient, that nothing lasts forever,
Yeah.
we're able to let go of that grasping, that need to control.
Right.
And in that letting go, our perspective widens.
So it's not just about accepting that things end.
Right.
It's about the freedom that comes with that acceptance.
Yes.
Freedom to experience life more fully without the constant fear of losing what we have.
Exactly. And I think that's where this idea of being time blossoms comes in.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that phrase from the blog post?
He uses that imagery to describe us humans. What do you think he's getting at there?
Well, on one level, it's a beautiful and evocative image. He's essentially saying that we're like flowers.
Okay.
We bloom for a while, we experience the fullness of life, and then we inevitably wither and fade away. But there's a deeper layer to it as well. He goes on to say that we're whole kaleidoscopic universes contained within these temporary forms.
Right.
So we're not just fleeting moments,
Right.
we're microcosms of something much grander.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
He's suggesting that by acknowledging our own impermanence, by seeing ourselves as these time blossoms,
Yeah.
we actually tap into something much larger than ourselves.
Exactly.
That's an infinite.
That's exactly it. It's a shift from a limited, egocentric perspective to a more expansive, interconnected view of reality. And within that expanded view, death is not an ending, but a transformation, a returning to the source from which we came.
And then he brings it all back to this idea of beauty, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
He talks about this seemingly paradoxical romance of eternal momentariness
Right.
as a source of true beauty and depth in our existence.
It's such a poetic way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's essentially saying that it's precisely because our existence is fleeting that it's so precious and beautiful.
Right.
The impermanence of it all heightens our awareness, intensifies our appreciation for each moment. Think about it. Would a sunset be as breathtaking if it lasted forever?
Right.
Would we cherish a loved one's embrace as deeply if we knew it would never end?
You're right. It's the very knowledge that things won't last that makes them so meaningful.
Exactly.
It's like the limited edition concept, but applied to life itself.
I love that.
Everything becomes a collector's item.
That's a great analogy, and I think that's a key takeaway for our listener.
Okay.
To approach life with that collector's mindset, to see each experience, each encounter, each moment as a unique and precious gift. Not something to be taken for granted, but something to be savored, to be fully present for.
So how do we do that? How do we actually cultivate this awareness of impermanence in our daily lives?
Yeah.
It's easy to talk about it in theory, but how do we actually put it into practice?
That's $1 million question, isn't it?
All right.
And I don't think there's one simple answer. But maybe it starts with something as simple as paying attention. Really paying attention to the world around us, to the changing seasons, the way light shifts throughout the day, the subtle changes in the people we love.
You mean becoming more present in the moment?
Exactly. And maybe also becoming more comfortable with the idea of letting go. Letting go of expectations, of attachments, of the need to control everything.
Right.
Because the truth is the only thing we can truly control is our own response to what life throws our way.
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
And it's certainly a different way of approaching life than what we're often taught.
Yeah.
Which is to strive for success, for security, for permanence.
Right. And I think that's why Ajmal's perspective is so valuable. He's not offering a blueprint for happiness or a set of rules to follow.
Right.
He's inviting us to question our assumptions, to challenge our deeply ingrained beliefs about what it means to live a good life.
And in doing so, to perhaps discover a deeper, more meaningful way of being in the world. One that embraces impermanence, not as something to be feared,
Yes.
but as a source of beauty, growth, and even liberation.
It's a powerful invitation indeed, and one that I encourage our listener to seriously consider.
So where does that leave us? How do we apply this to our everyday lives?
I think a good place to start is by noticing our own resistance to change.
Okay.
What are the things we cling to? Where do we experience fear or anxiety when faced with the unknown? Once we identify those areas, we can start to gently explore them with curiosity and compassion, asking ourselves, What if I let go of this need to control?
Okay.
What might become possible if I embraced the impermanence of this situation?
That's great advice. And I think it's important to remember that this isn't about becoming passive or resigning ourselves to fate.
Right.
It's about recognizing that change is inevitable and that we have a choice in how we respond to it.
You're absolutely right. It's about finding that sweet spot between acceptance and action.
Yeah.
Embracing the flow of life while still actively participating in its unfolding.
And perhaps in that space between acceptance and action, we discover the true magic of being time blossoms.
Perhaps we do.
As I was reflecting on this idea of embracing impermanence, I was struck by his use of the term magicians of the ephemeral.
Yeah.
He uses it to describe those who have truly mastered this art of living in the moment, of finding beauty in the fleeting nature of existence. What do you make of that term?
I find it incredibly evocative. It suggests that there's a certain skill, a certain mastery involved in navigating this impermanent world with grace and awareness. It's not just about passively observing as things change around us.
Right.
It's about actively engaging with the flow of life, recognizing the beauty in each passing moment, and finding a sense of wonder in the very fact that things don't last forever.
He goes on to say that true magicians of the ephemeral understand that to witness the blossom unfurling, one must also honor its disintegration. It's like he's reminding us that the cycle of life and death, of creation and destruction, is a continuous loop, and that trying to separate those two, to cling to one and reject the other, is ultimately futile.
It's about embracing the entirety of the cycle, recognizing that the beauty of a flower lies not just in its vibrant bloom, but also in the graceful way it surrenders its petals to the wind. And it's about applying that same understanding to all aspects of life.
But he also acknowledges that this way of seeing the world, of embracing impermanence, goes against the grain of how our society operates. He says we reflexively flee from this core premise. Why do you think that is? Why are we so resistant to this idea?
I think it's multifaceted.
Okay.
We become fixated on accumulating possessions, on achieving status, on building these elaborate structures of permanence, all in an attempt to ward off the inevitable reality of change and loss.
It's like we're trying to build a fortress against impermanence, when the reality is that impermanence is the very fabric of life itself.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of the myth of ownership comes in.
Right.
He argues that we become consumed by this idea of owning things, of possessing them, when in reality we're merely temporary custodians of everything in our lives.
Our possessions, our relationships, even our own bodies.
Precisely. And recognizing this, truly internalizing it, can be profoundly liberating. Because if we don't actually own anything, then there's nothing to lose.
It's a radical shift in perspective, but I can see how it would lead to a greater sense of peace and freedom, letting go of that constant striving, that grasping for things that are ultimately beyond our control.
It's about surrendering to the flow of life, trusting that even though things are constantly changing, we'll be okay. And that within that flow, within that constant dance of creation and destruction, lies a beauty and a richness that far surpasses anything we could create or control on our own.
So as we wrap up our discussion of Ajmal's Illusion of Permanence, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. If embracing the ephemeral nature of life is the key to unlocking its true richness, what small step can you take today to shift your perspective and live more fully in the present moment? Perhaps take a few minutes to truly appreciate something that you often take for granted. The warmth of the sun on your skin, the sound of laughter, the taste of your favorite meal. Remember, everything is temporary, and that's what makes it so precious. And for further exploration of these ideas, I encourage you to visit Ajmal's website, theborderaufamind.com. It's a treasure trove of insights and inspiration. Stay tuned for future episodes in this commentary series as we continue to delve into this thought-provoking work.